Imagine a man with just $900 left, sleeping in his car, betting it all on a crumbling farm shunned by everyone. What he finds in its dusty attic isn't just a fortune, it's a secret that could rewrite his life and countless others. Before we dive into this wild tale, drop a comment. Where are you tuning in from? If this story grabs you, smash that subscribe button. I've got something extra special cooking for tomorrow. Now, settle in for a journey of desperation, discovery, and a mystery buried deep in the heart of an old farm. The dashboard clock glowed 6:47 a.m., casting a faint light on Jackson Miller's haggard face. 3 years ago, at 42, he'd been a king of the financial world, a broker with a sleek corner office, a penthouse apartment, and a seven-figure portfolio. Then the market crashed like a house of cards, taking his clients, his job, his savings, and his marriage. His wife, Caroline, walked out with a suitcase and a barb. "You're too proud, Jackson. Learn to ask for help." Pride was all he had left, a brittle shield against the world. He refused to call his retired parents or his smug, successful brother. By May 2025, Jackson was down to $937.42, living out of his dusty sedan, showering at a 24-hour gym, and counting every dime. Parked outside the Millfield County Courthouse, Jackson sipped lukewarm coffee from a gas station cup, his eyes scanning a crumpled auction flyer. Most properties, foreclosed homes, commercial lots were far beyond his reach. But one listing caught his gaze, a 60-acre abandoned farm 60 miles from the city with a starting bid of $900. The grainy photos showed a dilapidated farmhouse, peeling white paint, shattered windows, a yard choked with weeds. The fine print warned of no running water, questionable wiring, and structural concerns. Jackson had grown up in a small farming town, escaping to the city at 18, vowing never to return to the backbreaking life of soil and sweat. But with winter's chill creeping closer and homelessness looming like a shadow, a crumbling farmhouse beat another night curled up in his car. He arrived at the auction early, the courthouse's oak-paneled room smelling of polish and old paper. The Thompson farm was last on the list, and when the auctioneer called it, the room stayed silent. Jackson's heart thudded. $900, he shouted, voice cracking in the quiet. Heads turned, some with pity, others with amusement. No competing bids came. Going once, going twice, sold to the gentleman in the back, the auctioneer declared, visibly relieved. As Jackson signed the paperwork, handing over nearly every dollar he had, the clerk, a gray-haired woman with kind eyes, hesitated. "That place has been empty for 20 years, Mr. Miller." "Old man Thompson, well, folks say it's cursed." Jackson forced a smile, his stomach twisting. "I don't believe in curses, ma'am. Just opportunities." The 60-mile drive to the farm was a blur of doubt. The gravel road stretched endlessly, flanked by fields of wild grass swaying in the spring breeze. The farmhouse appeared on a low hill, silhouetted against a bruised sunset, more desolate than the photos. Its roof sagged like an old man's shoulders, the porch steps were half-rotted, and the fields beyond were a tangled mess of weeds and saplings. "What have I done?" Jackson whispered, cutting the engine. He stepped out, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and neglect, and pushed open the front door. It creaked like a warning, echoing through the empty house. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust that danced in his flashlight's beam. Cobwebs draped the ceiling like tattered curtains, and faded wallpaper peeled in strips, revealing cracked plaster. The living room held a moth-eaten couch and a broken rocking chair, abandoned as if the owners had fled. The kitchen was a relic, rusted stove, warped cabinets hanging off hinges, a sink stained with years of grime. A narrow staircase led to dark bedrooms upstairs, their floors groaning underfoot. Exhausted, Jackson spread his sleeping bag on the living room floor, the hardwood cold against his back. As the house settled with eerie creaks and sighs, he stared at the ceiling, wondering if he'd thrown his last chance into a bottomless pit. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by the weight of his choices. Morning broke with a shaft of sunlight piercing a shattered window, its jagged edges framing a golden beam that spilled across the dusty hardwood floor, illuminating motes like tiny, drifting stars in a forgotten galaxy. Jackson Miller woke stiff and aching, his body protesting the night spent on the cold living room floor, the thin sleeping bag offering little cushion against the unyielding oak beneath. The air was heavy with the musty scent of neglect, tinged with the faint, earthy tang of mildew seeping from the walls. His breath caught as he sat up, the silence of the old farmhouse broken only by the distant trill of a sparrow outside and the occasional groan of settling beams. At 42, he felt older than his years, the weight of his failures pressing harder than the floorboards. Yet, as he rubbed sleep from his eyes and watched the sunlight dance, a flicker of resolve stirred. He'd made his bed however broken, and now he'd lie in it, or, by God, he'd fix it. This crumbling farm, bought with his last $900, was his last stand, a chance to rebuild not just a house but himself. Jackson rose, joints creaking, and stretched, his shadow stretching long across the room's peeling wallpaper, its faded floral pattern a ghost of better days. He stepped outside, the porch sagging under his weight, and took in the property in the morning light. The farmhouse loomed on its low hill, a weathered sentinel against the endless fields, its white paint chipped to reveal gray wood beneath, like bones exposed by time. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of dew-soaked grass and the faint, sweet decay of fallen leaves. Beyond the overgrown yard, where dandelions and thistles waged war, the 60-acre spread unfolded, wild, untamed, but alive with possibility. Jackson's city life, with its sterile offices and neon nights, felt a world away. He'd fled a rural upbringing at 18, vowing never to toil in soil again. But now, standing in the shadow of this broken dream, he felt an unexpected pull, as if the land itself whispered his name. He spent the day exploring the property, cataloging its wounds with the precision of a man who'd once dissected market trends. The farmhouse had solid bones, its oak frame sturdy despite decades of neglect, built to weather storms far worse than those that had undone Jackson's life. He climbed to the roof, boots slipping on moss-slick shingles, and counted 3 leaks, dark stains spreading like bruises on the attic ceiling below. The plumbing was a nightmare, a maze of corroded copper pipes that rattled ominously when he tested a faucet, yielding only a trickle of rust-colored water. The electrical wiring, exposed in places where plaster had crumbled, was a fire hazard waiting to spark, its frayed insulation a silent threat. Yet, as he traced each flaw, Jackson felt a strange kinship with the house, both battered, both still standing. Beyond the farmhouse, a stone well stood at the edge of the yard, its mouth choked with ivy that curled like green veins over the weathered rock. Jackson peered into its depths, the faint glint of water far below promising a lifeline if he could clear the debris and repair the pump. The barn, a hulking structure 50 yards away, sagged under a rusted tin roof, its red paint faded to a sickly pink. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old hay and motor oil, the floor littered with broken tools and rotting burlap sacks. But the beams were sound, the space vast enough for storage, repairs, or Jackson's mind flickered with a long-buried dream, livestock someday, maybe goats or a few hardy sheep. The field stretched beyond, a tangled sea of weeds and saplings that had rich, loamy soil beneath, its dark, fertile scent rising as he kicked through the overgrowth. He knelt, letting the earth crumble between his fingers, and felt a pulse of potential as if the land were waiting for someone to listen, to coax it back to life. By late afternoon, sweat-soaked and hands blistered, Jackson turned his attention to making the farmhouse livable. He hauled debris from the kitchen, shattered dishes, a warped cutting board, a rusted can of beans left by some long-gone squatter, and scrubbed the counters until they gleamed faintly under layers of grime. With a camp stove borrowed from his car, he boiled water for instant coffee, the bitter steam a small comfort as he surveyed his work. Upstairs, he chose the smallest bedroom, its single window offering a view of the fields at dusk, and swept away years of dust and mouse droppings, the broom's rhythmic scrape a meditation. The floorboards creaked but held, and he unrolled his sleeping bag, imagining a real bed someday, maybe even a home. As evening fell, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet, Jackson explored the barn again, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. Amid piles of junk, rusted pitchforks, a cracked leather saddle, he found a dusty generator tucked in a corner, its red paint chipped but intact. Kneeling in the straw, he tinkered with it, hands steady despite his exhaustion, drawing on half-remembered skills from teenage summers fixing tractors. After an hour of cursing and coaxing, the machine sputtered, coughed, and roared to life, its hum a defiant pulse in the quiet. The barn's single bulb flickered on, casting a warm glow over the chaos. Jackson sat back, a grin breaking through his weariness. It wasn't much, a single light, a clean corner, a whisper of water in a well, but it was a start, a flicker of hope in the dark. As he stepped outside, the first stars emerging above the fields, he felt the farm's weight settle on his shoulders, not as a burden but as a purpose. Tomorrow, he'd dig deeper, not knowing that the house held secrets far greater than its broken beams, secrets that would test his resolve and change everything. On the third day, curiosity pulled Jackson to the attic. The pull-down ladder groaned under his weight, but it held as he climbed into a musty darkness. His flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing a clutter of forgotten relics, trunks with rusted latches, stacks of yellowed newspapers, furniture draped in moth-eaten sheets. The air smelled of mildew and time, heavy with the weight of abandonment. As he navigated the creaking floorboards, his light caught a faded oil painting leaning against a beam. It depicted a stern man in a high-collared suit, standing before this very farmhouse in its prime, fields golden and sky clear. The man's deep-set eyes seemed to follow Jackson, sending a shiver down his spine. "You must be Old Man Thompson," he muttered, half to himself. Moving the painting aside, Jackson noticed a loose floorboard, its edges worn smooth as if lifted often. It came free with a tug, revealing a hollow space beneath. Inside sat a rusted metal lockbox, heavy and cold to the touch. His pulse quickened as he carried it to a clearer spot and grabbed an old hammer from a pile of tools. A few sharp strikes broke the padlock and the lid creaked open. Wrapped in faded burlap were a stack of documents, a leather-bound journal, and Jackson's breath caught, several banded stacks of cash, some bills crisped from the 1960s, others worn but real. He counted, hands trembling, $50,000. "Holy hell," he whispered, the sound swallowed by the attic silence. The journal, written in cramped, urgent handwriting, spanned 1967 to 1982. Entries were cryptic, hinting at a shadowy operation. Shipment arrived at dusk. Meeting are at the usual spot. Can't trust anyone now. The final entry, dated May 15, 1982, sent a chill through him. "They're coming for me." If you found this, the journal explains all. The real treasure isn't this cash, it's worth millions, hidden on the farm. Only a worthy successor will find the map. Trust no one. Jackson shook his calloused hand, noting the firm grip. Jackson Miller. Just moved in a few days ago. Ray's hazel eyes scanned the farmhouse, lingering on the sagging roof. "You've got a project here." Charlie Thompson wasn't much of a farmer, but he always had cash. Folks around Millfield wondered where it came from. "You knew him?" Jackson asked, keeping his tone neutral. Ray chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. Nobody knew Charlie Thompson. Kept to himself, had visitors, city types, fancy cars, always at night. He paused, studying Jackson. "Word of advice, this place has a history. Best leave some stones unturned. You might get other visitors soon enough." With that, he climbed into his truck and drove off, leaving Jackson with a growing sense of unease. Visitors? Who else was watching this forgotten farm? That night, Jackson sat at the rickety kitchen table, the lockbox's contents spread before him. The journal's entries painted a picture of secrecy. References to the operation, the product, and the Brotherhood suggested smuggling, but of what? Drugs? Cash? Why was his grandfather's face in that photo? Ray's cryptic warning echoed, "Other visitors soon." Who was coming, and what did they want with a derelict farm? The next morning, Jackson drove to Millfield, a small farming town 15 miles away, with $5,000 from the lockbox tucked in his wallet. The hardware store smelled of sawdust and oil, its aisles crammed with tools and supplies. He loaded a cart with roofing shingles, lumber, plumbing pipes, and a toolbox, spending $2,000. The clerk, Frank, a wiry man with bushy eyebrows, raised them when Jackson mentioned the Thompson farm. That place? Been empty 20 years. Easier fixer-uppers in the county. Thompson had money, but not from crops or cattle. Ever hear of something called the Brotherhood? Jackson asked, watching Frank's face. Frank's hands paused on the register, his eyes narrowing. Social club, maybe from way back. Long gone. His tone was clipped, shutting down the question. Jackson paid and arranged delivery, sensing Frank knew more than he let on. At the county records office, a small brick building with creaky floors, Jackson met Mrs. Grayson, a kindly clerk with wire-rimmed glasses. She pulled a thin folder on the farm. It had changed hands several times before Charlie Thompson bought it in 1963 from James Miller, Jackson's grandfather. The sale, the same year Jackson's father, Robert, was born, was for 5 times market value, no explanation given. Jackson's heart raced. Mrs. Grayson returned with more records. James Miller, born 1925, died 1983, married Eleanor Thompson in 1949. There's a resemblance, she said, eyeing Jackson. Eleanor, possibly related to Charlie, had a son, Robert, born 1963. Jackson's family had deep roots here, but his father never spoke of Millfield. Any relatives still around? Jackson asked. Edward Thompson, Charlie's nephew, lives on Maple Street in town, Mrs. Grayson said. He and Robert were close as boys, despite family troubles. What kind of troubles? Jackson pressed. Her lips tightened. That's for family to tell, Mr. Miller. Jackson left with photocopies, his mind spinning. His grandfather owned this farm. His grandmother was a Thompson. His father grew up here, yet never mentioned it. Why the silence? And why did Thompson pay so much for a rundown property? Back at the farm, Jackson pieced together a timeline under the flickering light of a battery-powered lantern. In 1963, James Miller sold the farm to Charlie Thompson at an inflated price and left Millfield. Robert, born that year, fled after high school, never returning. Thompson vanished in 1982, his car found abandoned with blood in the driver's seat, declared dead after 7 years. The journal's Millions and map hinted at a treasure tied to the farm, but where? On the 5th day, as Jackson hammered new boards onto the porch, a sleek black sedan pulled up, its polished surface out of place on the dusty road. A man in his early 60s stepped out, silver hair neatly styled, dressed in khakis and a crisp polo shirt that screamed quiet wealth. Jackson Miller? He called, approaching with an outstretched hand. Edward Thompson. I hear you've been asking about me. Jackson wiped sweat from his brow and shook his hand, wary. Word travels fast. Small towns, Edward said with a thin smile. No secrets, or few. His eyes flicked to the farmhouse. You've been busy. Planning to stay? That's the plan, Jackson said, studying him. Charlie's nephew, possibly his grandmother's kin, and someone who knew his father. Inside, over instant coffee at the cleaned-up kitchen table, Edward got to the point. You're Robert Miller's son. Buying Charlie's farm isn't a coincidence. I didn't know it was his, Jackson said truthfully. Just a cheap lot at auction. Edward's eyes narrowed, unconvinced. Whatever you found here, money, documents, belongs to Charlie's estate. I'm his closest relative. Share what you find next, and you keep what you have. Jackson bristled. I bought this legally. Everything's mine. I'm not here to fight, Edward said, leaning forward. I'm offering a deal. Find the map, the documents, and we split it. Charlie was into dangerous things. You're not safe poking around. Jackson's pulse quickened. Edward knew about the map. What's so special about a map? Don't play dumb, Edward snapped. Your father knew what's hidden here. That's why James sold to Charlie, to distance your family from trouble. If Robert sent you, He didn't, Jackson cut in. I haven't seen him since I was 12. He's dead. Edward blinked, genuinely surprised. He's alive. In Arizona under Richard Matthews. You didn't know. The room spun. Jackson's father, who'd vanished after a supposed car accident, had faked his death? Get out, he said, voice trembling. Edward slid a business card across the table. Call me when you're ready to talk. Be careful who you trust. The Brotherhood still has people in Millfield. He left, the sedan's engine fading into the dusk. That night, a thunderstorm rolled in, rain lashing the windows and thunder shaking the old house. Jackson tore through the farmhouse, driven by Edward's revelation and the journal's clues. He pried up floorboards, tapped walls for hollow spots, and checked the chimney, finding nothing. In the cellar, a dank space lined with dusty shelves of ancient preserves, he noticed a patch of dirt slightly raised, its color off. Using a rusted garden trowel, he dug, uncovering a wooden trapdoor flush with the earth. A hard press triggered a click and one edge popped up. Beneath was a dirt-lined chamber holding a shoebox-sized metal container. Inside, a leather map case held a hand-drawn parchment of the farm, marked with tunnels linking the farmhouse, barn, and intriguingly Ray Harker's neighboring property. X's with codes like LB7 dotted the map. A folded note in Thompson's handwriting read, "The product's gone. Millfield got too hot. The real value is knowledge hidden where only family would look. Blood calls to blood. Trust no one." Jackson's mind raced. Tunnels? Product? Knowledge worth millions? The storm raged outside, but he barely noticed, consumed by the map's secrets. At dawn, he set out for the spot marked LB7 in the northern woods, a dense tangle of oaks and brambles. After an hour of pushing through undergrowth, he reached a small clearing. A dilapidated hunting cabin stood in the center, its log walls weathered to a dark gray, roof sagging under years of neglect. The door hung crookedly, creaking as he stepped inside. Dust coated a single table, a rusted stove, and a broken chair, untouched for decades. Behind the stove, a section of wall felt different, logs fitted to slide. Jackson pushed, revealing a narrow space with another metal box. Inside was a scientific journal, newer than Thompson's, and a letter from James Miller to Charlie, dated September 1963. "The ledgers are at LB7, as agreed. I'm taking my family and leaving. The farm's yours, but I keep what I learned. If anything happens to me or mine, the authorities get a full account. The samples are where we discussed. Use them wisely or not at all. James?" The journal, its leather cover cracked and pages yellowed like ancient parchment, lay open on the dusty attic floor, its words pulling Jackson into a world of forbidden science. In meticulous, faded ink, it chronicled compound LB7, a synthetic drug derived from a rare plant species, Silveria pentifolia, cultivated in secret on the farm's fertile soil. Early entries, dated 1964, brimmed with cautious optimism, describing experiments in a hidden lab beneath the barn. The compound, extracted from the plant's distinctive five-lobed leaves, showed remarkable regenerative properties, accelerated healing of wounds, tissue repair in days rather than weeks, even partial organ regeneration in animal trials. Hand-drawn charts mapped LB7's molecular structure, its complex chains promising a medical revolution. The writer, likely James Miller, Jackson's grandfather, called it a gift from the earth, a key to rewriting human suffering. Yet, as Jackson turned the pages, the tone shifted. Entries from 1968 grew terse, tinged with dread. Human trials begun. Unstable side effects emerging, behavioral anomalies, aggression, memory lapses. By 1972, the warnings were stark, cellular degradation observed in 30% of subjects. Rapid aging in some, organ failure in others. LB7 is as much poison as cure. Marginal notes, scrawled in a shakier hand, questioned the ethics. Are we playing God or the devil? A black and white photograph slipped from the journal's brittle pages, landing softly in the attic's dust. Jackson lifted it, his flashlight revealing a stark scene. James Miller, Charlie Thompson, and 4 others stood in lab coats, their faces grim under harsh fluorescent light. They were in an underground lab, its concrete walls lined with steel shelves holding vials and beakers. Trays of 5-lobed Silveria plants dominated a central table, their leaves glistening as if alive with secrets. Behind them, a chalkboard bore equations and timelines, a map of ambition and ruin. The men's eyes held no pride, only the weight of what they'd unleashed. Jackson's breath caught, recognizing his grandfather's stern jaw, a mirror of his own, and Thompson's hawkish stare from the attic painting. The Brotherhood wasn't smuggling drugs as he'd first feared. They were creating them, pioneers of a miracle compound with the power to heal or destroy. The journal hinted at their vision, a cure for cancer, burns, even aging itself, funded by shadowy investors who saw dollar signs in salvation. But the side effects, meticulously logged, told of hubris, patients who healed miraculously only to descend into madness or collapse into dust. A final note, dated 1975, underlined in red, LB7 must be stopped. The plants are hidden. The formula stays with family. If we fail, the world pays. The words sent a chill through Jackson, the attic's shadows closing in as he realized the farm wasn't just a relic, it was a vault guarding a secret that could reshape humanity or end it. A twig snapped outside. Jackson froze, peering through the cabin's cracked window. A tall figure in dark clothes stood at the clearing's edge, watching. Heart pounding, Jackson stepped out, gripping his flashlight like a weapon. "Can I help you?" "Jackson Miller," the man said, voice deep with a faint, unplaceable accent. He stepped forward, revealing a lean frame and silver hair cut military short. "Dr. Victor Reeves, part of the research team. Charlie always said someone would come back for it." Jackson tensed. "Come back for what?" The snap of a twig outside the dilapidated hunting cabin sent a jolt through Jackson Miller, his flashlight trembling in his grip as he peered through the cracked, grime-streaked window. A tall figure loomed at the edge of the clearing, half-shadowed by the dense oaks and brambles of the northern woods, their leaves rustling in the late morning breeze. The man's dark clothes blended with the forest, but his silver hair caught a flicker of sunlight, betraying his presence. Jackson's heart pounded, the weight of the hidden box, containing a scientific journal and his grandfather's letter, pressing against his back in his backpack. He stepped out, gripping the flashlight like a club, his boots crunching on the cabin's rotted porch. "Can I help you?" he called, voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Jackson Miller," the man said, his voice deep and measured, carrying a faint accent Jackson couldn't place. Eastern European, perhaps, worn smooth by years. He stepped forward, revealing a lean frame, military short hair, and sharp, gray eyes that seemed to pierce through the morning mist. His weathered face held a mix of caution and recognition, as if he'd been expecting this moment for decades. "Dr. Victor Reeves, part of the research team. Charlie Thompson always said someone would come back for it." He stopped a safe distance away, hands visible but relaxed, his posture suggesting he was no stranger to tense encounters. Jackson tightened his grip, the journal's revelations compound LB7, a plant-derived drug with miraculous but unstable properties flashing through his mind. "Come back for what?" he asked, eyes narrowing, testing how much Reeves knew. "LB7, Reeves said, the word heavy with reverence and warning. He glanced at the cabin, its sagging logs a silent witness to secrets buried for generations. A compound that could heal wounds in days, regenerate tissue, even extend human life beyond natural limits. It was a breakthrough unlike anything the world had seen, born from a rare plant species your grandfather, James Miller, helped cultivate right here on this farm. His voice softened, tinged with awe, but his eyes darkened. James was our best chemist, a visionary who saw LB7 as a gift to humanity, curing diseases, saving lives. But he got cold feet when the side effects appeared. They were unpredictable, sometimes deadly. Patients healed miraculously, then suffered hallucinations, aggression, cellular mutations that turned them into something less than human. Jackson's stomach churned, the journal's cryptic warnings about unstable side effects and behavioral anomalies taking on a chilling clarity. He pictured his grandfather, a man he'd only known through faded photos, wrestling with such a discovery. Why didn't he destroy it? Jackson asked, his voice barely above a whisper, the forest's silence amplifying the weight of the question. Reeves's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile that held no warmth. He tried. We all did at first. But the potential was too great, the lure of perfection too strong. LB7 wasn't just medicine, it was power. Pharma companies caught wind, offering billions to control it. The government saw other uses, soldiers who could heal from mortal wounds, operatives who wouldn't age. They wanted to weaponize it, turn it into a tool for control or war. His voice hardened, a flicker of anger breaking through his composed facade. We refused to let that happen. Your grandfather, Charlie, myself, the others in the Brotherhood, we went underground, hiding our work in tunnels beneath this farm in labs no one knew existed. But secrets like that don't stay buried without a cost. He paused, his gaze drifting to the trees as if seeing ghosts in their shadows. People started dying. Accidents at first, a lab fire, a car crash. Then suicides, men broken by what they'd seen, what they'd done. Disappearances followed, researchers vanishing without a trace. Charlie Thompson was one of the last, his car found abandoned in '82, blood staining the seat, no body ever recovered. Reeves's eyes locked onto Jackson's, intense and unyielding. The Brotherhood fractured, torn apart by fear, greed, and guilt. Some wanted to sell LB7, others to destroy it. James hid the formula, the samples, everything, and walked away, trusting his family would one day decide its fate. That's why I'm here, Jackson. You found what we lost, what I've watched this farm for decades to protect. Jackson's mind raced, the letter from James echoing, if I'm harmed, authorities get a full account. Reeves knew about the map, the box, maybe more. The air felt heavier, the forest closing in, its whispers now a warning. What do you want from me? Jackson asked, stepping back, the cabin's shadow cold against his shoulders. The formula, the samples, Reeves said, his tone urgent but controlled. To finish what we started, not for profit or power, but for medicine done right, safely. I've spent my life chasing this, hiding from those who'd kill to control it. He reached into his jacket, slowly, producing a plain business card with a phone number scrawled in black ink. Call me when you're ready to decide. But be careful. Ray Harker's no simple farmer, his family's tied to this deeper than you know. His daughter, Abigail, is sharper than she seems, and she's watching you too. Reeves stepped back, his figure blending with the trees. Choose wisely, Jackson. LB7 is a blessing and a curse, and you're holding both. With that, he vanished into the woods, moving with a predator's grace, leaving Jackson alone with the weight of a secret that had already claimed lives. What do you want? Jackson asked, hand tightening on his backpack. The formula, the samples, Reeves said. To finish what we started, safely, for medicine, not war. I've watched this farm for decades. When you started poking around, I knew you were close. Jackson's mind raced. Reeves knew about the lockbox, the map. I'll think about it. Reeves handed him a business card, his eyes sharp. Call me when you're ready. Be careful around Ray Harker, he's no simple farmer. His daughter's sharper than she seems. He turned and vanished into the woods, moving with eerie ease. Jackson sat at the scarred oak table in the farmhouse's dimly lit kitchen. The journal and maps spread before him like pieces of a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. The air was heavy with the musty scent of old wood and the faint tang of rain that had seeped through the still leaky roof, despite his patchwork repairs. A single battery-powered lantern cast flickering shadows across the peeling wallpaper, making the room feel alive, as if the house itself were whispering secrets it had held for decades. Outside, the night was restless, a late spring wind rattling the loose shutters and sending a low moan through the eaves. Jackson's hands, roughened from days of hammering and hauling, trembled slightly as he traced the map's hand-drawn lines. Its ink faded but deliberate, marking tunnels and cryptic codes like LB7 that promised answers or danger. His mind churned, caught in a whirlwind of revelations that had upended everything he thought he knew. His father, Robert, was alive, hiding in Arizona under a false name, Richard Matthews, a truth that struck like a betrayal. Jackson had been 12 when Robert vanished, leaving behind a vague police report about a car accident and a closed-casket funeral that now felt like a lie. The pain of that loss had shaped him, hardened him, fueled his relentless drive to prove himself in the city, far from the rural roots his father had abandoned. To learn Robert was out there, silent all these years, was a wound reopened, raw and aching. Why hadn't he reached out? What had driven him to fake his death? The journal, with its cryptic references to the Brotherhood and the product, suggested answers tied to this farm, to the very ground Jackson now owned. LB7 was the heart of it, a dangerous breakthrough, a plant-derived compound that could heal the body but twist the mind, its potential both miraculous and monstrous. The scientific journal from the hunting cabin had laid it bare. Early tests showed tissue regeneration, even hints of curing the incurable, but human trials revealed side effects, erratic behavior, cellular mutations, whispers of something unnatural. Jackson's grandfather, James Miller, had been part of it, a chemist whose ethics clashed with the Brotherhood's ambition. The photograph of James, Charlie Thompson, and others in lab coats haunted Jackson, their stern faces a reminder that his family was entwined with this secret, whether he wanted it or not. And Victor Reeves, the shadowy figure in the woods, was watching, his cryptic warning about Ray Harker and his daughter, Abigail, echoing in Jackson's mind. Be careful who you trust. Were others out there, circling like vultures, waiting for him to unearth what Thompson had hidden? The weight of it all pressed on Jackson's chest, each new clue tightening the knot of fear and determination that had taken root since he'd found the $50,000 in the attic. That cash, now tucked safely in a lockbox under the sink, was a lifeline. Enough to fix the roof, restore the well, maybe even start anew. But it paled against the millions Thompson's journal promised. A treasure not in dollars but in knowledge, hidden somewhere on this sprawling 60 acres. The map was the key, its tunnels and coded markers hinting at a network beneath the fields. A secret infrastructure built by men who operated in shadows. But where to start? The farm was vast, its woods dense, its barn and outbuildings crumbling under years of neglect. Searching blindly could take months, years, and every moment risked drawing attention from those Reeves had warned about. Jackson leaned back in the creaking chair, rubbing his eyes, the lantern's glow blurring as exhaustion crept in. He'd barely slept since finding the lockbox, driven by a need to understand, to reclaim something from the wreckage of his life. 3 years ago, he'd been a man who controlled markets, who bent the world to his will. Now he was a squatter in a derelict farmhouse, chasing ghosts and riddles, his pride battered but unbroken. Caroline's words, "learn to ask for help," echoed, but asking for help meant vulnerability, and vulnerability felt like surrender. Yet, alone in this creaking house, with the wind howling like a warning, he wondered if pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. His gaze fell on the journal again, its leather cover worn smooth by years of handling. He flipped through its pages, the cramped handwriting a window into Charlie Thompson's paranoia are betrayed us. The product's safe, but not for long. The Brotherhood watches. Always. Then, a note in James's precise, slanted script caught his eye, tucked between Thompson's entries like a message meant for him. E's birthday tomorrow. She wants to visit the old place. Too risky, but her roses still bloom there. Jackson's breath hitched. Eleanor, his grandmother, a Thompson by birth. He'd never known her, she'd died before he was born, but his father's rare stories painted her as a gentle soul, her laughter warm, her hands always dusted with garden soil. The old place had to be her childhood home, a piece of Thompson family history tied to her roots. And roses, why mention them? Were they a clue, a marker, or just a sentimental aside? Jackson unfolded the map again, studying it under the lantern's light. The parchment crinkled, its edges brittle, but the lines were clear. The farmhouse, the barn, Ray Harker's neighboring land, all connected by tunnels that snaked beneath the earth. No mention of another property, no old place, but Eleanor's home could be nearby, a forgotten Thompson estate where secrets were buried. The note's tone, too risky, suggested James had hidden something there, something worth protecting, perhaps the samples mentioned in his letter from the cabin. Jackson's pulse quickened. If the roses still bloomed, the place was intact, overlooked by those who'd come after Thompson. It was a lead, fragile but real, a thread to pull in a tapestry of lies and half-truths. He stood pacing the kitchen, the floorboards creaking under his boots. The farmhouse felt smaller now, its walls closing in with the weight of what he'd uncovered. Reeves's card sat on the table, its stark white surface a reminder of eyes in the dark. Ray Harker's warning, expect other visitors, and Edward Thompson's veiled threats gnawed at him. The Brotherhood, or what remained of it, was out there, their interest in the farm undimmed by decades. Jackson was no detective, no hero, just a man who'd lost everything and stumbled into a hornet's nest. But he'd bought this farm with his last $900, claimed it with his sweat and stubbornness. Whatever secrets it held were his to find, his to wield or destroy. The wind died outside, leaving an eerie silence. Jackson sat again, the journal open to James's note. Eleanor's birthday was a date he didn't know, but the old place was a starting point, a beacon in the fog. He imagined his grandmother's roses, red and white blooms defying time, rooted in soil that held answers. The county records office would have property records, deeds, something to pinpoint the Thompson family's other holdings. Mrs. Grayson, with her kind eyes and sharp memory, could help. Jackson glanced at his phone, 2:17 a.m., too late to call now, but at first light he'd reach out, chasing the next piece of the puzzle. Below is an expanded version of the provided excerpt from The Secret of Thompson's Farm, focusing on the moment Jackson opens the strongbox at the Thompson homestead. The expansion enriches the scene with vivid sensory details, deeper emotional resonance, and additional context about Eleanor, James, and the LB7 mystery, while preserving the original content and tone. It enhances the suspense, underscores Jackson's personal stakes, and reinforces the rural, nostalgic atmosphere suited for a YouTube-style storytelling channel like Farming Legends or Farmer's Tales. The expanded text maintains the narrative's flow, ensuring it integrates seamlessly with the broader story, and amplifies the weight of James's letter as a pivotal moment in Jackson's journey. The old Victorian house at the Thompson homestead stood like a ghost of its former glory, its gables sagging under decades of neglect, its once vibrant paint faded to a mournful gray. Jackson navigated its overgrown yard where Eleanor's rose garden defied time, red and white blooms bursting with life amid tangled weeds, their sweet fragrance a stark contrast to the decay. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of rot and dust, the floors creaking ominously under his boots. Tattered wallpaper hung in strips, and shafts of late-afternoon sunlight pierced broken shutters, casting jagged shadows across the parlor. Jackson's flashlight swept the room, settling on a section of wainscoting that didn't belong. Newer wood, its grain smoother, fitted with precision to blend but not quite match. His pulse quickened. This was no accident. He pressed the panel, feeling a faint give, and with a gentle push, it swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a shallow compartment carved into the wall. Nestled within was a modern strongbox, its steel surface glinting faintly, untouched by the house's decay. A combination dial stared back at him, cold and unyielding. Jackson's mind raced, recalling Mrs. Grayson's words at the county records office. Eleanor's birthday was April 17, 1927. His grandmother, a Thompson by birth, had grown up in this very house, her love for its rose garden a family legend his father had mentioned in rare, unguarded moments. If James had something here, he'd tie it to her, to family. With a steadying breath, Jackson spun the dial, April 17, 27. A soft click echoed in the silent parlor, sharp as a heartbeat. The strongbox's lid eased open, revealing its secrets like a long-held breath finally released. Inside, cushioned by faded velvet, lay a sealed metal container, its surface etched with the cryptic label LB7 Original Specimen. Beside it was a thick folder bound in leather, its cover stamped with the words Complete Formula and Synthesis Protocol in precise, typewritten letters. A third item caught his eye, a cream-colored envelope, its edges yellowed but intact, addressed in a steady, elegant hand, to my grandson. Jackson's hands trembled as he lifted it, the weight of the moment pressing against his chest. He was no longer just a man down to his last dollar, scavenging for survival. He was a miller standing in the heart of his family's past, on the cusp of a truth that had cost lives and haunted generations. He sank to the creaking floorboards, the envelope crinkling as he broke its wax seal, the faint scent of old ink rising like a whisper from another time. The letter unfolded, revealing James Miller's handwriting. Firm yet intimate, as if written under the glow of a lantern in a world Jackson could only imagine. With the rose's perfume drifting through a shattered window and the house groaning softly around him, Jackson read, each word landing like a stone in still water. My dear grandson, if you're reading this, you've found what many sought and few understood. LB7 was our dream, a compound born from a rare plant meant to heal the unhealable, to regenerate tissue, to cure diseases that steal hope. In our hidden lab beneath the farm, we saw miracles, wounds closing in hours, organs mending, lives extended. But dreams have shadows. LB7 alters human cells, sometimes monstrously, twisting mind and body into forms no one should endure. Test subjects, volunteers, friends suffered, some lost to madness, others to changes we couldn't reverse. I couldn't destroy it, the potential for good was too great, a beacon for a better world. Yet I couldn't let it fall into greedy hands. Corporations, governments, men who'd wield it for power or war. So I hid it here, in the house Eleanor loved, where her roses still bloom, protected by the family she cherished. You stand at a crossroads. Destroy LB7 and you spare the world its dangers but bury its promise. Give it to authorities and you risk it being twisted by those we fled. Or harness its good, eliminate the flaws, share it openly, let it heal as we intended. Power is neither good nor evil, it's the hand that wields it. You found this because you're a miller, because blood calls to blood. I trust you to choose wisely as I trusted Eleanor's love to guide me. Whatever path you take, know I write this with love and faith in you. Your grandfather, James Miller. Jackson's throat tightened, the letter blurring as tears welled. He'd never known James, dead before Jackson was born, yet the words felt alive, a bridge across decades. The man in the Brotherhood photo, stern and distant, was now a grandfather who'd risked everything to protect a dream and to trust a future he'd never see. The strongbox's contents, the specimen, the formula, were no mere treasure. They were a legacy, a burden, a choice that could reshape lives or repeat old tragedies. Outside, the roses swayed in the evening breeze, their petals catching the fading light as if Eleanor herself were watching, her love woven into the very earth. Jackson folded the letter, his resolve hardening. He'd come to this farm broken, seeking only shelter. Now he held a power that demanded he become more, someone worthy of the trust placed in him. Footsteps creaked on the porch. Jackson shoved the contents into his backpack and slipped behind a rotting beam. Abigail Harker stepped inside, her auburn hair tied back, hazel eyes scanning the room. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt, her boots scuffing the dusty floor. Jackson, she called, voice steady but tense. I know you're here. Dad saw you head this way. Jackson stepped out, gripping his backpack. Abigail, how are you involved? She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. My mother was an LB7 test subject, willingly at first. She had terminal cancer. LB7 put it in remission. But the side effects, they changed her. Her mind, her body. She wasn't herself. Dad was the botanist growing the plants for the compound. When things went wrong, people dying or worse, he wanted out, but it was too late. I offered to lease your fields to keep an eye on you, make sure you didn't find what you shouldn't. But you did, didn't you? Jackson stood in the dim parlor of the abandoned Thompson homestead, the air thick with the scent of rotting wood and the faint, stubborn sweetness of Eleanor's roses drifting through a broken window. Dust motes swirled in the slanted light, catching on the edges of his backpack where the strongbox's contents, LB7's original specimen, research notes, and his grandfather's letter felt heavier than their physical weight. Abigail Harker faced him, her auburn hair catching the fading daylight, her hazel eyes sharp with a mix of wariness and something softer, like hope battling fear. Her words, "You're in deep," hung between them, a warning and a confession. She'd revealed her mother's tragic history with LB7, a cure that became a curse, and her father's role in growing the plants that fueled the Brotherhood's dangerous dream. Now she waited, arms crossed, for Jackson to show his hand. His fingers tightened on the backpack, heart pounding with the weight of a choice that could reshape his life and countless others. The letter from his grandfather, James Miller, was more than words on paper. It was a charge, a legacy passed through decades of silence and secrecy. Destroy it, give it to authorities, or harness its good. James had trusted him to decide, but the risks were staggering. Corporations hungry for profit, governments eyeing a weapon, or worse, the Brotherhood's lingering shadows, like Victor Reeves, ready to reclaim LB7 for their own ends. Jackson's old life, pride-fueled, solitary, urged him to hide the find, to leverage it for personal gain. But the farm, this homestead, and the ghosts of his family demanded more. Caroline's parting words echoed faintly. Learn to ask for help. For the first time, he wanted to trust someone to share the burden. Jackson hesitated, his gaze flickering to the warped floorboards, then back to Abigail. Her presence grounded him, her raw honesty about her mother's suffering a mirror to his own buried pain. You said no secrets, he said, voice low, testing her resolve as much as his own. She nodded, a single, deliberate motion, her eyes never leaving his. With a slow breath, he unzipped the backpack and drew out the letter, its paper creased but pristine, as if James had written it yesterday. He held it out, the act feeling like a surrender and a stand all at once. My grandfather left this for me, he said, his voice steadier now, each word a brick in a new foundation. It's not just about LB7, it's about what it could be, what it should have been. I'm bringing it into the light, transparently, with independent researchers, not corporations or governments. No more secrets, Abigail. Not between us, not with the world. Abigail took the letter, her calloused fingers brushing his, a fleeting warmth in the chilly room. She unfolded it carefully, her eyes scanning James's elegant handwriting, the words of a man who'd wrestled with the same moral weight now resting on them. LB7 heals but alters cells, sometimes monstrously. Power is what you make it. Her breath caught, a flicker of pain crossing her face, memories of her mother, perhaps warped by the compound's side effects. This is why James hid it here, she said softly, almost to herself. In Eleanor's roses, where only family would look. He knew someone like you would come. She looked up, her gaze piercing yet warm, like sunlight through storm clouds. You're risking everything, Jackson. Reeves, Edward, maybe others, they won't let this go quietly. I know, Jackson said, stepping closer, the creaking floorboards punctuating the moment. But I'm done running. My grandfather spent his life hiding this, and it cost him his family, his peace. My father faked his death to escape it. I won't let LB7 stay a shadow, hurting people like it did your mother. We do this right, open research, public trials, no backroom deals. If we fail honestly. His voice carried a conviction he hadn't felt in years, not since the days when deals were struck in boardrooms, not cellars. The farm had changed him, its soil and secrets rooting him to something bigger than himself. Abigail handed the letter back, her expression shifting, grief giving way to resolve, like a field after rain. My mother believed in LB7 once, she said, voice raw but steady. She thought it would save her, give her years with me. It did for a while, until it took her mind. Dad burned the plants, but he couldn't burn the guilt. If you're serious about this, I'm with you. Not just to watch, but to fight for it. For her. She extended her hand not as a neighbor or a wary ally, but as a partner in a battle neither had chosen but both would face. Jackson clasped her hand, her grip firm, a silent vow. The homestead's walls seemed to exhale as if the ghosts of James and Eleanor approved. No secrets, he repeated, a promise to her, to himself, to the legacy he'd uncovered. Outside, the roses swayed in the evening breeze, their petals a reminder of what had been lost and what could still be saved. The path ahead was treacherous, but for the first time since the market crashed, since Caroline walked away, Jackson felt he wasn't walking it alone. Abigail's eyes softened, a flicker of pain giving way to resolve. You sound like James. Dad said he was the only one with principles. I'm in, Jackson. No hidden agendas. He studied her, seeing the raw honesty in her face. Okay, but we do this right. She nodded, a faint smile breaking through. No secrets. 3 months later, the farmhouse stood transformed, its fresh white paint gleaming under the summer sun. New windows reflected the clear sky, and the porch, once a hazard, now held sturdy rocking chairs. The fields, cleared of weeds, hosted research plots where botanists studied LB7's plant origins. The barn, reinforced and wired, was a state-of-the-art lab buzzing with scientists. Jackson had digitized the research, encrypting copies to release to multiple sources if anything happened to him, a safeguard against those still watching. 3 months after uncovering the LB7 secrets, Jackson stood in the transformed farmhouse, its freshly painted walls glowing under the hum of new lights. The fields outside, once a jungle of weeds, now hosted neat research plots, and the barn had become a bustling laboratory. But the journey to this point hinged on uneasy alliances and unexpected reunions, each figure from the farm's shadowy past playing a pivotal role. Edward Thompson had been a storm of fury when Jackson first refused to hand over the attic's contents. The silver-haired man had stormed back to the farm a week after their tense meeting, his polished sedan gleaming incongruously against the dusty gravel drive. "You're stealing my family's legacy," he'd shouted, pacing the creaking porch, his tailored khakis wrinkled from the long drive. He brandished a lawyer's letter threatening to sue for the $50,000 and any artifacts tied to Charlie Thompson's estate. Jackson, exhausted from days of repairing the roof, stood firm, his calloused hands clenched. "I bought this farm fair and square, Edward. The cash, the journal, it's mine to use for something bigger." Intrigued despite his anger, Edward listened as Jackson outlined his plan to revive LB7 research transparently with independent scientists, not corporate greed. The fire in Edward's eyes dimmed, replaced by a grudging respect. "You're as stubborn as Robert," he muttered, referencing Jackson's father. Over coffee in the newly cleaned kitchen, Edward agreed to a truce. He returned days later with a weathered suitcase of Thompson family records, ledgers, letters, and grainy photos from the 1960s detailing Charlie's early dealings with the Brotherhood. "If you're doing this, do it right," he said, his voice gruff but earnest. Those records, meticulously organized, mapped the supply chains for LB7's rare plant, proving invaluable to the botanists now combing the fields. Edward visited weekly, his sharp eyes scanning the lab's progress, a silent partner who'd traded lawsuits for a stake in redemption. Ray Harker, the grizzled neighbor who'd warned Jackson to leave stones unturned, was harder to sway. When Jackson approached him at his sprawling farm, its red barn stark against rolling hills, Ray leaned on a pitchfork, his weathered face etched with suspicion. "You're stirring up trouble, Miller," he growled, his hazel eyes narrowing under a sweat-stained cap. Ray's skepticism stemmed from decades of guarding his own secrets, his role as the Brotherhood's botanist, cultivating the 5-lobed plants that birthed LB7. Jackson, standing in the shade of a towering oak, shared the journal's findings and his vision for safe, ethical research. "Your knowledge could save lives, Ray. Help me make it right." The old farmer's shoulders sagged, the weight of his past evident in his tired sigh. After a long silence, he nodded, his calloused hand extended. "For Abigail's mother," he said softly, referencing his late wife's suffering under LB7's side effects. Ray's expertise became the project's backbone. He trudged through the fields daily, his worn boots leaving trails in the loamy soil, teaching researchers how to coax the rare plants from dormancy. His greenhouse, hidden behind his barn, yielded cuttings that accelerated the trials, and his gruff advice, delivered over mugs of bitter coffee, kept the team grounded. Ray's transformation from wary outsider to vital ally mirrored the farm's own revival, his knowledge a bridge between past mistakes and future hope. Victor Reeves, the enigmatic scientist who'd emerged from the woods, remained a ghost in Jackson's mind. After their encounter at the hunting cabin, Reeves vanished as swiftly as he'd appeared, his business card plain white, with only a phone number tucked in Jackson's wallet like a dormant threat. Jackson suspected Reeves hadn't gone far, picturing the lean, silver-haired man watching from Millfield's shadows, perhaps from a nondescript car parked on a distant hill. Reeves had wanted the LB7 formula to finish what we started, but his cryptic warnings about Ray and Abigail hinted at a deeper agenda. Jackson's calls to the number went unanswered, the line always dead, yet he couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. Late at night, as he reviewed research data under the farmhouse's flickering porch light, he'd glance at the dark fields, half expecting Reeves's silhouette. The scientist's absence left a void of unease, a reminder that not all the Brotherhood's ghosts were ready to rest. Jackson encrypted the LB-7 files with military-grade security, ensuring Reeves or anyone else couldn't steal the research without a fight. Still, he wondered if Reeves was biding his time, waiting to see if the trials succeeded before making his move. Most astonishing was the reconnection with Jackson's father, Robert Miller, now living as Richard Matthews in a sun-baked Arizona trailer park. The call came late one evening as Jackson sat in the farmhouse's refurbished living room, the scent of fresh paint mingling with the tang of pine cleaner. He'd sent encrypted LB-7 files to an email address Edward provided, hoping to verify Robert's survival. When his phone buzzed with an unknown number, Jackson's heart thudded. "Jackson, it's me," came a voice, familiar yet worn, like a song half forgotten. Robert's words were cautious, tinged with guilt for faking his death decades ago to escape the Brotherhood's reach. Over a crackling line, he shared vivid memories of Millfield in the 1960s, sneaking into the farm's tunnels as a boy, overhearing James and Charlie argue about LB-7's risks, and watching his father, Jackson's grandfather, bury research to protect the family. "I ran because I was scared," Robert admitted, his voice breaking. "You're braver than I ever was." He offered insights into the Brotherhood's early days, names of chemists, locations of hidden labs, ethical debates that fractured the group. Those details, scribbled on a notepad under the glow of a desk lamp, guided Jackson's team to refine LB-7's formula, stripping its dangers. Robert's call became a weekly ritual, their conversations weaving a fragile thread of reconciliation. He spoke of visiting the farm someday, of seeing the fields his father once walked, a promise that hung in the air like the desert dust he now called home. These alliances, Edward's records, Ray's botany, Robert's memories, and even Reeves's lingering shadow, wove a network around Jackson's mission. The farmhouse, once a symbol of his desperation, was now a beacon of purpose, its fields and lab a testament to what broken men could rebuild when they chose trust over secrets. Most astonishing was the reconnection with Jackson's father, Robert Miller, now living as Richard Matthews in a sun-baked Arizona trailer park. The call came late one evening as Jackson sat in the farmhouse's refurbished living room, the scent of fresh paint mingling with the tang of pine cleaner. He'd sent encrypted LB-7 files to an email address Edward provided, hoping to verify Robert's survival. When his phone buzzed with an unknown number, Jackson's heart thudded. "Jackson, it's me," came a voice, familiar yet worn, like a song half forgotten. Robert's words were cautious, tinged with guilt for faking his death decades ago to escape the Brotherhood's reach. Over a crackling line, he shared vivid memories of Millfield in the 1960s, sneaking into the farm's tunnels as a boy, overhearing James and Charlie argue about LB-7's risks, and watching his father, Jackson's grandfather, bury research to protect the family. "I ran because I was scared," Robert admitted, his voice breaking. "You're braver than I ever was." He offered insights into the Brotherhood's early days, names of chemists, locations of hidden labs, ethical debates that fractured the group. Those details, scribbled on a notepad under the glow of a desk lamp, guided Jackson's team to refine LB-7's formula, stripping its dangers. Robert's call became a weekly ritual, their conversations weaving a fragile thread of reconciliation. He spoke of visiting the farm someday, of seeing the fields his father once walked, a promise that hung in the air like the desert dust he now called home. These alliances, Edward's records, Ray's botany, Robert's memories, and even Reeves's lingering shadow, wove a network around Jackson's mission. The farmhouse, once a symbol of his desperation, was now a beacon of purpose, its fields and lab a testament to what broken men could rebuild when they chose trust over secrets. The $50,000 from the attic funded the farm's initial restoration, roof patches, plumbing, wiring, but LB-7's patents brought real money. Modified compounds, stripped of their dangerous side effects, entered clinical trials, showing promise for treating burns, organ failure, even some cancers. Abigail became more than a partner, their shared mission forged a bond, hints of something deeper in their late-night talks over coffee. One golden evening, as crickets chirped in the fields, Robert Miller visited. He stepped from a rental car, tall and weathered, his face a mirror of Jackson's but etched with years of hiding. "Dad," Jackson said, the word strange after decades believing him dead. "Jackson," Robert said, voice thick. "The place looks alive. Better than I ever saw it." They stood on the porch, the air sweet with the scent of fresh-cut grass. "Want to see what we've done with grandfather's work?" Jackson asked. Relief flickered in Robert's eyes. "I'd like that." They toured the lab, where Abigail greeted Robert with a firm handshake. "Harker," he said, recognition dawning. "You look like your mother." Abigail's face tightened. "You knew her?" "She was in the early LB7 trials," Robert said softly. "I'm sorry for what happened. We didn't know the risks then." "That's why we're here," Abigail said, voice steady. "To make it right." Inside, researchers analyzed plant samples and ran simulations. Robert shared insights from the Brotherhood's beginnings, his voice heavy with regret. "Your grandfather wanted to heal the world. When it went wrong, he hid it all, trusting family to finish it the right way." Jackson nodded, a lump rising in his throat, thick with a mix of pride and unspoken grief. His grandfather's letter, its words inked in a steady hand, echoed in his mind. "Power is neither good nor evil, it's the hand that wields it." James had entrusted him with a choice that carried the weight of decades: destroy the dangerous LB7 compound, hand it to authorities, or harness its potential for good. For weeks, Jackson had wrestled with that burden, alone in the farmhouse's quiet nights, the creak of its settling beams a reminder of the secrets it held. He'd come to this farm broken, a man with $937.42 and a car for a home, driven by desperation to buy a cursed property no one wanted. The addict's $50,000 and cryptic journal had been a lifeline, but the true treasure was this moment, standing on the restored porch, fields alive with purpose, facing the father he'd thought dead. "He left it for me to decide," Jackson said, voice catching as he met Robert's gaze, seeing his own hazel eyes mirrored in a face lined by years of hiding. "I chose to bring it into the light. It wasn't just about LB7's healing promise, now stable in trials, free of its monstrous side effects. It was about breaking the cycle of secrecy that had fractured their family, James's departure, Robert's fake death, Eleanor's unspoken pain. By sharing the research openly with independent scientists and no corporate strings, Jackson was reclaiming the farm, not as a relic of shame, but as a beacon of hope, its soil nurturing a legacy that could save lives. Jackson nodded, a lump rising in his throat, thick with a mix of pride and unspoken grief. His grandfather's letter, its words inked in a steady hand, echoed in his mind. "Power is neither good nor evil. It's the hand that wields it." James had entrusted him with a choice that carried the weight of decades: destroy the dangerous LB7 compound, hand it to authorities, or harness its potential for good. For weeks, Jackson had wrestled with that burden. Alone in the farmhouse's quiet nights, the creak of its settling beams a reminder of the secrets it held. He'd come to this farm broken, a man with $937.42 and a car for a home, driven by desperation to buy a cursed property no one wanted. The addict's $50,000 and cryptic journal had been a lifeline, but the true treasure was this moment. Standing on the restored porch, fields alive with purpose, facing the father he'd thought dead. "He left it for me to decide," Jackson said, voice catching as he met Robert's gaze, seeing his own hazel eyes mirrored in a face lined by years of hiding. "I chose to bring it into the light. It wasn't just about LB7's healing promise, now stable in trials, free of its monstrous side effects. It was about breaking the cycle of secrecy that had fractured their family, James's departure, Robert's fake death, Eleanor's unspoken pain. By sharing the research openly with independent scientists and no corporate strings, Jackson was reclaiming the farm, not as a relic of shame, but as a beacon of hope, its soil nurturing a legacy that could save lives. "No more secrets," Jackson said, his voice soft but resolute, carried on the warm evening breeze as fireflies sparked in the dusk, their golden flickers weaving a delicate dance across the sprawling fields. He leaned back in a sturdy rocking chair on the farmhouse's restored porch, the wood creaking gently under his weight, a far cry from the rotted steps he'd first climbed 3 months ago. His $900 gamble, born of a desperate, last-ditch bid to escape the cold grip of homelessness, had become a lifeline, not just for him, but for countless others who might one day benefit from the groundbreaking research now rooted in this once-forsaken land. The farm, once a crumbling monument to his lowest moment, a place where he'd arrived with nothing but a dusty sedan and a heart heavy with failure, was now a beacon of hope, its freshly painted walls glowing under the fading sun, its fields alive with purpose. Each acre told a story of redemption. The barn, now a bustling lab where scientists refined the LB7 compound, the research plots where rare plants promised healing without harm, the well, once choked with ivy, now flowing clear. Jackson's gaze drifted to the horizon where the last light painted the rolling hills in hues of amber and rose, and he felt a quiet pride, not the brittle shield that had kept him from seeking help, but a hard-earned certainty that he'd honored his grandfather's legacy. The Thompson farm, reclaimed from decades of secrets and shadows, stood as a testament to what could grow from broken ground, a family reunited, a community revitalized, and a future where his $900 bet could save lives across the globe. As the fireflies multiplied, their glow mirroring the stars emerging above, Jackson knew this was more than a home, it was a purpose, a legacy that would outlive him, etched into the soil he'd once sworn never to touch. Robert raised his mug. "To James. And to you, son." Abigail clinked her mug against theirs. "To the future." Below is an expanded version of the provided closing paragraph from The Secret of Thompson's Farm, deepening the emotional resonance, sensory details, and thematic closure while preserving the original sentiment. The expansion enriches Jackson Miller's moment of triumph, emphasizing his transformation from desperation to purpose, the farm's role as a symbol of redemption, and the renewed connections with family and community. It maintains the cinematic, heartfelt tone suited for a YouTube-style storytelling channel like Farming Legends or Farmer's Tales, grounding the scene in vivid rural imagery and tying together the story's themes of legacy, healing, and home. The expanded text reflects on Jackson's journey, the LB7 project's impact, and his bond with Abigail and Robert, offering a satisfying, uplifting conclusion. Jackson leaned back in the rocking chair, a genuine smile spreading across his face. The weight of years, failure, loss, and relentless pride, lifting like morning mist burned away by the sun. The abandoned farm, once a last-ditch purchase made with his final $900 in a moment of desperate defiance, was no longer just a shelter against the cold bite of homelessness. It was purpose, a beacon of meaning forged from the ashes of his old life. It was family, not only in the rekindled bond with his father, Robert, who sat beside him, but in the unexpected partnership with Abigail Harker, whose quiet strength had become his anchor. Most of all, it was a fortune not measured in the $50,000 found in the attic or the patents now funding the LB7 trials, but in the countless lives the compound promised to save: burn victims, organ transplant patients, those battling diseases once deemed untreatable. The farmhouse, restored to its former glory, stood proud under the deepening twilight, its fresh white paint glowing faintly in the last light of day. The fields, once choked with weeds, now stretched out in neat rows, their research plots vibrant with the 5-lobed plants that held the key to LB7's miracles. The barn, no longer a sagging relic, hummed with the soft buzz of lab equipment, a testament to the future Jackson had helped build. Fireflies began their nightly dance, flickering like tiny lanterns across the land, their golden sparks mirroring the stars emerging one by one in the vast, indigo sky. The air carried the sweet scent of freshly cut grass, mingled with the faint perfume of Eleanor's roses still blooming at the old Thompson homestead, a reminder of the family legacy that had guided him here. Robert, his hair silvered but his eyes bright with a newfound peace, sipped his coffee, his gaze tracing the horizon where the fields met the woods. "I never thought I'd see this place like this," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Your grandfather dreamed of something good coming from his work." You made it real, son. The word son, spoken without hesitation, bridged decades of absence. A wound Jackson hadn't realized still ached until it began to heal. Abigail stepped onto the porch, her auburn hair catching the starlight as she balanced 3 mugs of coffee, the steam curling upward like a quiet promise. "Trials are looking good," she said, settling into a chair beside Jackson. "The new LB7 is stable, real healing, no side effects. We're making history." Her smile, warm and unguarded, held a spark of something more. A connection forged in late-night planning sessions and shared dreams of a better world. She'd been a stranger 3 months ago, a wary neighbor with her own painful ties to LB7, but now she was family in a way Jackson hadn't known he needed. He took a mug, the warmth seeping into his hands, grounding him in the moment. "No more secrets," he said, his voice steady, echoing the vow he and Abigail had made at the Thompson homestead when they uncovered James's final gift. The farm had been a gamble, a leap into the unknown driven by necessity, but it had given him more than he'd ever sought. It was a home in every sense of the word, not just the sturdy walls and fertile fields, but the people who shared its vision, the purpose that pulsed through every restored beam and every seedling in the lab. The stars above seemed to burn brighter, each one a silent witness to his journey from a broken man in a dusty sedan to someone who'd found his place in the world. Jackson raised his mug, meeting his father's eyes, then Abigail's. "To James," he said, "and to what we're building here." Robert clinked his mug against Jackson's, a rare smile breaking through. "To family." Abigail's mug joined theirs, her gaze steady. "To the future." As they drank, the crickets' chorus swelled, a timeless hymn of the land. Jackson felt a quiet certainty settle in his chest, a knowing that this farm, this life, was where he was meant to be. The abandoned Thompson farm, once a symbol of his lowest moment, had become a legacy, a fortune not in gold, but in hope, in lives transformed, in a home that would endure long after the stars faded into dawn. Thanks for joining us, folks. Drop your thoughts below. Does Jackson's journey hit you in the heart? Subscribe for more stories of grit, mystery, and redemption. Until tomorrow, keep chasing your own treasures.